turn left at Coburn Street, all the way to the end.
Tumbling down, I feel the earth start to tremble down. Whenever you're around, I just lose control.
Okay, find the car. Number one. What's your name? Okay, find the car. Okay, Harrison. Okay, Harrison, I need your car.
As a whole, it's just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
The great playground of the imagination.
Like a massive fun house.
You feel like you've arrived.
This is 70 years of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe.
70!
It's just so breathtaking.
So many
talented performers in one place.
It's one of the most important melting pots for ideas in the world.
You get to see some of the most exciting and thrilling performances.
You can get anything. You can go see anything.
You've got circus, you've got dance, you've got cabaret.
Comedians, actors, buskers.
From a serious drama to juggling to a clown act to a naked drag queen.
Any conceivable thing is worth a try.
They cater for every taste.
It's the roulette of let's go in and we don't know what it's about, but let's just go and watch it.
And if it's good, people will see it.
Hello and good morning, at least from Scotland. It might not be morning where you are. Thank you for joining in, listening to us today. My name's Alan and I'm here with my colleagues Daniel, Caroline and Eve. And we're going to run this session for you today about making the most of your time at the Fringe, specifically relating to marketing your show and talking to the media. So I'm going to just quickly start by giving you a bit of a rundown on what to expect from this session. So it should be around an hour. We ran the session last night. We ran a little bit over, but we're feeling very prompt today, so we're going to get things running right along on time. And basically, in terms of contacting us, these sessions work really well if you can get involved as much as you can and let us know any questions you have. And please do use the comment section under the video for that. Just a quick note, to use those comments, you do need to be signed in to YouTube. So if you have a Gmail account or if you have a YouTube account, if you just sign in now, you'll be able to leave us a nice comment there in the section. Also, other than that, sorry, I realise I'm not facing the microphone. Other than that, we also have a web address that's mediaadvice@edfringe.com. So if you can't get signed in today, please, any emails you have, do just send directly to mediaadvice@edfringe.com and we'll be able to get to those questions you may have. You'll hear that email address a lot. That's one thing we're going to repeat quite a lot through this session. Now, any additional information about any future sessions that we have, you can find that on our website with the link that we've just popped up on screen just now. And if you've missed any of the previous 4 of these sessions we've done that take you through different aspects of how to make the most of your time at the Fringe and bring a show here, then we've also got the link there on the Take Part section of our website. So, getting right to things, I guess we really want to introduce ourselves so as you know who we are. So my name's Alan. I'm the marketing and registration coordinator here at the Fringe Society. I lead the show registration team, so I may have spoken to you, some of you already, as you register your show with us to be in the Fringe programme and also online and on the app. And then the other part of my job is I lead up on media advice, which is the service that we provide here at the Fringe Society to any registered participant to help you get as much out of your show as possible, whether that be speaking to journalists or getting some audience through the door. So I'm going to now let my colleagues introduce themselves. So Caroline.
Yeah, hi, I'm Caroline. I'm the Media and Marketing Advice Officer. I may have already spoken to some of you either in one-on-one sessions or when I've answered your email. When you've emailed media advice, I can already see some familiar names tuning in. I can see Monica and Amanda Jane, who I've already spoken to.
Fellow Australian,
Amanda Jane. Hi, Amanda. I basically am here to help you with all the marketing for your show leading up to and during the Fringe. So any questions from press releases to flyers to social media, I can help you with those kinds of things.
Thank you, Caroline. And next up is my colleague Daniel. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Daniel, and I'm the Digital Marketing Coordinator here at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. And I think I come at this from a slightly different perspective than Alan and Caroline, in the sense I work in the marketing team and are responsible for things like the Fringe Society's social media channels, our email marketing, and all kinds of digital marketing we do. So I'm coming at this to talk about social media and all the ways you can get involved with the Fringe that way.
We're getting you some FaceTime with the participants.
I know. I normally, working in social media, you're normally locked in a dark room and you don't talk to anyone face to face. So
we've let him out the cave today, guys. Although we still are very much coming to you from a cave.
Yes.
in the depths of Edinburgh. And finally, I'm going to introduce, because she is not near the microphone, but very much part of the session, with lovely Eve, who's in charge of all of our web and technology to bring us to you live today. So first things first, we really want to give you just a quick bit of sort of context about the Fringe and the Fringe Society, which is where we all work for, just to help you put sort of into context where your show sits, and let you know what you're heading into in August, which is all very exciting. So I put some numbers up on the screen there at the moment, so as you can just sort of get an idea of the scale of the Fringe. Last year there were over 3,000 shows, which meant over 50,000 performances, and then almost 2.7 million tickets were issued. The other 2 points at the bottom of the screen there is really what we're all about, which is our ethos. The Fringe is the largest open access festival in the world. And basically that means that anyone who wants to do a show and can find a venue can. It is in no way curated. We're not in charge of who comes. There's no director of the Fringe. And that's a really important part of our ethos. And we're here to support that Fringe and help both audiences and companies and participants and venues, anyone who wants to be a part of this wonderful festival. We're there to support that and make sure that everything runs as smoothly as it possibly can. So more specifically, we're based, most of us are based within the media office during the Fringe. Now the media office exists to sort of help promote the festival as a whole, and help accredit sort of almost 1,000 journalists, I think, last year from all across the world. One of the reasons we bring that up is that we're completely impartial. So we're trying to support the Fringe as a whole, and that includes every single show that registers. So we would never contact the press on your behalf or be like, hey, here's this show that we think is the best. No, we are proud parents who love everyone exactly the same. No favourites here. And that's really important to know, that we're here to help you make the most of your time here. It's just we can't directly do anything for you. Well, we can do lots for you, but we can't directly tell the press, like, oh, go and see this one. So it's about us sort of enabling you to have the tools to do that for yourself. The ways we do that is we offer one-to-one marketing advice. As Caroline says, some of you have spoken to her already, and we're available like sort of right through the year, and then mainly in August. We're based in Fringe Central, so do always come in and say hello. It's just a really nice first stop if you've just arrived and things are a bit overwhelming. It's really nice just to nip in and sort of have some friendly faces and say hi and just get your bearings. We offer press release feedback, we give media contacts. Those are some of like the main things that we do that people find really beneficial, and those two things will come up a lot throughout this session. And then finally, we process media tickets for a huge number of shows, depending on what venue you're playing in, throughout the whole month of August. So the media office will be handling all requests for media tickets that come in from journalists, so as you can check your report and see if your press releases and such have worked and got people interested. So we're about to sort of start the session in full now that I've done some housekeeping and given you some context. We're going to have some slides that come up. They're very much going to be like, so as you can, if you want to take notes, but we're going to have conversation points around those points. So to start off, there's a common thread here, because if you have a meeting with either Caroline or myself, one of the first things that we will say to you is, so tell me about your show. And there's a reason, because that is the question that you will be asked about 18,000 times a day in August, and it can be really difficult to answer. So, Caroline, do you want to start off by letting people know how they should approach answering that?
Yeah, well, we always say that you should have an elevator pitch prepared, and that might be a new term for some people, but essentially an elevator pitch is you should be able to, theoretically, by the time you travel between floors on an elevator with someone, pitch them your show. So that's probably about 30 seconds at the most that you have to sell them your show. So we say that you should be practicing your elevator pitch just as much as you should be rehearsing your show. This is your chance when you're handing out flyers on the Royal Mile or anywhere else to really to really sell to sell your show. And so you really have to have a think about the the interesting aspects of your show, what makes it unique, what you're passionate about. If you're a bit stuck on trying to figure out what those things are, ask other people in your company, ask your friends, ask your family what things have stood out for them, and really fine tune that 30-second pitch so that when people come up to you and you're handing them a flyer and they say, okay, all right, tell me about your show, you can actually really sell that to them.
Yeah, and do you know what, there's a reason that we put this sort of topic of conversation first, and it's because so often we get people come to us and they're like, how do I get the Scotsman to come, or I want to get audiences, and it's like jumping ahead. Whereas if you think of this as like the foundation of your marketing campaign, you need to be able to know what it is you're effectively selling, and it's so important not to like dismiss it or think you've already got it without actually taking the time. Like, I speak from experience, I don't have lots of big marketing degrees. My experience comes from, I did this. I was self-producing. I did all of the PR for my show myself. And I used to hate when people would be like, tell me about your show. Because I could sell other people's till the cows came home. But suddenly when you've got yours, I froze up and was like, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of sad, and a dog dies. And that is literally how I sold my show. One of my friends was like, your show's actually all right. Like, why are you selling it like this? So genuinely take that time. Like I say, have a conversation and then get everyone involved in the show, or a group that you can pull together to just list down 5 bullet points and then come together and have a discussion. Because if you just have a discussion, we know what it's like, you end up having the same points, you go around in circles, and you end up with the same sort of wording that you've always had. Whereas we did the bullet point game, and one of our actors, who I hadn't thought was going to bring a lot to the table, he was unpredictable, and he came up with, it's a black comedy, and I was like, oh my god, that is exactly what it is, rather than me going, it's sort of funny but it's sort of dramatic. So genuinely, I can't stress enough, I think, the importance of getting this right, because it will help you not just talking to audiences, flyering, but also talking to the media, talking to any arts industry if you're looking for a tour or anything, any kind of onward journey for your show. Being able to, in a short, pithy paragraph, sum up exactly what your show is, so important.
From the perspective of someone who used to come to the Fringe a lot before I'd started working here, I used to be one of those people who Alan probably hated, which is where if we had that brief conversation where he'd pass me a flyer, I would ask him, so what's the show about? Tell me something, get my interest, because the Fringe is a vast, busy landscape, and there isn't much. You've got to grab people's attention quickly, and if you can really nail that succinctly, you're going to get more people interested in your show.
And it's funny because I love talking to other people about their shows, but it's that thing, I think it can sometimes feel like sort of shameless self-promotion, which can feel a little bit awkward sometimes, but that's exactly what you need to do. So when we say write it down as if it's part of a script, what that does is it helps it become less like self-promotion and more okay, this is just part of the show like any other.
Yeah, and I'm a bit like Daniel. I have been to many Fringes before, and I'd be handed thousands of flyers as I was walking around the city, and I'd say to people, so tell me about your show, and there'd be shows that I had no thought that I would actually be interested in attending, but as soon as that person gave me their elevator pitch, I was convinced, and I bought a ticket and went and saw it and had a great time. So you can change people's minds, audiences that you didn't think would be interested in your show, you can capture just with a really golden elevator pitch.
Amazing. Honestly, on the Royal Mile or all over the city, when you hear someone doing it right, it does jump out to you. And Caroline's right, even something that you weren't necessarily thinking is your genre, suddenly you're like, oh, hang on, this sounds really cool, really interesting, and I've got the story behind it, and I feel like I understand that performer. So you've got your what your show is, you've got your unique selling point, you've got your hook. There's now one more question that you need to solidify before you start making any real sort of marketing decisions or contacting the press. And that one is, who's your show for? And I'm going to throw to you, Daniel, our social media guru, to kind of give us some basics on finding your audience.
Thanks. Just before I get sort of stuck into this topic, I thought I'd just throw a few more housekeeping just points into the mix, which is first that if you miss anything during this live stream, you can come back to the session at any point. It'll be recorded. You could fast forward and rewind, but we do recommend sticking with it live for now, so you can use the live chat and keep up to speed. And through that live chat, just like Kenneth has just done, we'd love to hear any questions you may have, whether that's about what we're talking about now or maybe something that's coming up, and we'll do our very best to pick them up at the right point. And if there isn't a section of this presentation that covers it, we'll try and cover it at the end.
Yeah, totally. Something I should have said at the start is actually, once we get going, you'll see that we're going to talk about things very much in sections. So we've got a press release section, a contact in the media section, social media, for example. So with questions, you'll probably find that we're going to hit a certain pool that will hopefully answer your questions or be an appropriate time for it to flag up. I'm going to answer Kenneth's question really quickly because I don't think we mentioned it yesterday, and it's a very good one. So Kenneth's asking, do you recommend using half-price hut? We've got a really big space, and I know we won't sell it every night. So that's a really good question. So the half-price hut is a hut. No, it's our box office that is on the Mound precinct. And it does exactly what it says in the tin. It's a place where you can put an allocation of tickets, which are then sold at half price. It opens the first Wednesday of the Fringe, so after like the first weekend and then the 2 for 1 days. And exactly as Kenny said, it can be a really good way of kind of generating those extra sales, particularly sort of early in your run when you want to start getting word of mouth going. The thing I always really like about Half Price Hut is it's not a long-term commitment. You could literally decide day by day. So you could say like, I'm going to throw 10 tickets in there for the first couple of days and see what happens. And then if suddenly word of mouth starts going and you get a great review and things go on themselves, you absolutely then have no commitment to keep those tickets there for the rest of the Fringe run. So hopefully that answers your question. I would say a tip for the Half Price Hut is always keep it in even numbers, just because people tend to buy tickets in pairs, so an odd number can sometimes be a little bit awkward at the Half Price Hut. So sorry, Daniel.
I was just going to add on the Half Price Hut that the shows that are listed in that are displayed very prominently on the official Fringe app and on edfringe.com, and really commonly used by people who aren't quite sure what they want to go and see.
Yeah, totally.
And fancy taking a chance on something. So it's
you literally go to the Half Price Hut because you don't know what you want to see and you're just looking for a bit of a bargain. So it's a great way to find.
Like Alan says, if you want to build word of mouth in those early stages, it's a great thing to be part of. Excuse me 1 second. So before we jump off on that tangent, let's just field Kenneth's question there. Does it cost to use them? Which Monica has answered for us, which is great. There's no cost to go into the Half Price Hut, apart from the fact, obviously, your tickets are being sold at half price. So the clues in the name with that one. So just coming back onto topic about who is your show for, which is that second question you really need to answer. And in those sort of early slides, Alan touched upon how massive the Fringe is in Edinburgh, if you've not been before, with over 3,000 shows and 2.7 million tickets. So when you're asking yourself who's your show for, the answer isn't everyone.
Never everyone.
It's never everyone.
I refuse to believe it. There are people that don't like Beyonce. There are people that don't like Game of Thrones.
Unbelievable.
So there are lots of people here, but they've obviously got their own different interests and backgrounds and things they want to come and see, whether that's comedy, drama, black comedy about where a dog dies.
It was good. I promise.
I wish I'd seen it. So working out who's your show suitable for, and that in turn can then inform what you're going to do for your marketing and for your press release and for your advertising, because there may not be just one core group. It may be, we need people who like this aspect, but you need to narrow down what is interesting about your show, what makes it stand out, and what's going to make someone be interested in it.
Absolutely, and I would say many people who come to the Fringe, and many people are self-producing, they don't have a publicist, so some of the things that are really on your priorities is there might be a tight budget, or there definitely will be tight amounts of sort of your own personal time and energy. So anything you are giving of that to a marketing campaign, you want to be throwing all of that time, money and energy in the right direction, rather than going, if you've got like a late night stand-up show, rather than going after like a school group that's going to a children's show at 10 a.m. You want to find your audience and then throw the energy that way.
Just a question on that actually is that obviously yesterday was 2 weeks to go until programme launch. Would you advise people to check out the programme, to see where their show sits?
Oh my god, totally. And we also have last year, so we've got the 2017 programme. The full PDF still sits on edfringe.com. I'm sure Eve might be able to pop a link to that in the feed. So as at the comment section as we go. So you've got the full 2017 programme you can go. So as much as loads of shows are on sale for 2018, and you can definitely sort of check the relevance there, you could find shows that are similar to yours from 2017 and then give them a bit of a Google, see the kind of coverage they got, check them out on social media. It's a really good kind of research tool really for checking where you're at in the proceedings. So now that we've got this question answered, we've got the what is your show and who's it for, you're then going to want to make first contact. It sounds very dramatic, but basically that's about contacting the media and getting the word of your show out there. The main tool we have for this is a document called the Media Contact List. So I'm going to throw to Caroline because it's one of your favourite documents.
It really is, Alan. The Media Contact List, if you are the media contact for your show, you would have hopefully received this about 3 weeks ago. It's a password protected document. So when you sort of go through the steps in the email, you'll generate an access code, and you or the primary contact for your show, the media contact or the primary contact for the show, will be able to access that document. It's actually a list of media that cover the Fringe. That's updated every year. And so we know that all of the people in that list, and this covers broadcast journalists, reviewers, online, newspapers, magazines, we know that all of those journalists and reviewers on that list are happy to be on there, and we'll be covering the Fringe this year. So once you've got that list, and if you are the primary contact and the media contact and you haven't received that, or you don't know what I'm talking about, please send us an email at Media Advice. And I'll sort that out for you. But once you do have that list, it's time to do your research.
Oh, it's like I planned it.
Yeah, look at that. Amazing.
I was going to ask the question from a participant's point of view, Caroline. Once I've got that list, do I just excitedly email every single person on it?
Absolutely not, Alan. You do your research, and to do your research, what you do is you go through that list. There's a lot of contacts on there, but that can only be a good thing. You go through that list and you find the journalists and reviewers that are relevant to your show. So if you're doing a theatre show, then you're probably not going to be interested in, or the journalists and reviewers that are covering children's shows are probably not going to be interested in your show. So you've got to find the media that is most relevant to your show. So that means going through that list, you'll find, if you've not already looked at it, you'll find that there's a few pages of just a list of contacts, and then there's full profiles on each of those publications. So you can kind of go through and find out a bit more information about the kinds of shows they're interested in, about the genres that they like to cover. There's also sometimes a bit of information where they've provided it on when they like to start receiving press releases, and some top tips for contacting them. So really thoroughly read that. You want to create a hit list of journos, basically, who are going to be the targeted group of media that you will be contacting about your show.
Amazing. And when it comes to when to contact them, I would really say kind of the sooner the better at this stage. Like May is a really good time to be sending out that initial press release, making first contact, if you will, just to get on people's radar. Like as Daniel said, it's not long now until we launch on the 6th of June. Once that full programme has been launched, it's a little bit like the floodgates open, and suddenly everyone becomes like excited school children who are like, oh my god, there's so much stuff, I want to see everything. So if you can get on people's radar a little bit before that, it does really help. And it's not always about kind of pushing for a response straight away. It's about kind of just letting them know about your show and giving yourself time to follow up without pestering. So if you get in touch now, it then gives you time to kind of, you could almost do like one email a month, just sort of following up with slightly new information, like we've done a successful preview, or we've got some new photos, that kind of thing. So I guess this leads us swiftly on, Caroline, to like, what is it you're actually sending these people?
What you're sending is a press release. I guess that's the main thing. And we're going to be talking about the kinds of things that you should be putting in your press release now.
Yeah, just to quickly, I can see Expressing Humanity has given us a question. Daniel, I can see the microphone, it's fine. How many people do you recommend to have on that hit list? I always say like around 20. That kind of.
Well, it's it's as long as a piece of string, really. Like with any of these answers, I mean, it ultimately comes down to how many people on that list are relevant to your show.
Totally.
I mean, that if we give you a set number and then you don't feel that you've got that number, then you're going to start worrying. But, really just go through that list, find publications, journalists that you think will be interested in what your show's about, and, make them your targeted list.
And obviously when you're thinking about who is your show for, your show will have a different niche or a different genre.
Totally.
And some of them have a much broader number of contacts covering it than others. So there is no one size fits all.
I always say that my sort of catchphrase was always like, it's much better to like pick 20 people and do a nice direct email than email like 60 with a really sort of vague, not knowing if they're relevant to you kind of aspect. And that leads us swiftly on really to the next slide, because we've got like a bit of a what you should try to do with your release, and then also what you should try to avoid. So Caroline, you've been reading lots of press releases that people have been sending in to us at the moment. What do you feel are kind of like the main things that someone should try to get right about their press release when they're sending it?
Yeah, look, I have been reading a lot of press releases lately, and it's been a sort of a mixed bag. There's lots of different styles and formats and content that is coming through. And so really what you're looking to do is keep it short, keep it concise. You ideally don't want it more than one A4 page. So while you do want to include all the really important bits like what your show's about, why the show was developed, like the inspiration or the background to the show, and who you are as a performer or as a company, you don't want to be going into like a full synopsis or full biographies of everyone in the cast or the creative team. So you want to make sure you cover off those things. And if you haven't, I'll just do a bit of a plug here. If you haven't received our template, if you're a registered show, we actually, and you're doing sort of a press release for the first time, we actually have a really great resource. It's a press release template which kind of goes through the ideal formatting and the ideal content for one of these. So send us an email at media advice if you haven't received one of those and you're a bit stuck with how to write a press release. You want to make sure that you're including things like your ticketing information. There's a way we recommend on our template that you can list that at the bottom of your press release. When you're sending this press release through to media, we advise not attaching it as a PDF or attaching photos as well to the email. We advise putting, copy and pasting that press release into the body of an email, and at the top of that just putting a little short introduction, a little personalised introduction to the media about, or the contact, the journalist that you're writing to. That kind of shows that you've done your research. If you go through the list and you've got, say, for example, your 20 journalists on your hit list, and you put in their name and Fringe into Google, you can kind of have a bit of a look at the shows that they've written about before. So when you write to them, you can say, "Dear John, I saw that you were writing about these kinds of shows last year, thought you might be interested in mine. Please see the press release below. More than happy to have a chat to you if you'd like to come and see my show or interview me." That's just to show that you've done your research, and having worked as a journalist before working here, I know that if I received an email from someone that looked like they'd done their research, I was more inclined to sort of pick that up and follow through with it than someone who was just blindly emailing me a press release. The reason why we say don't attach documents is because if you're sending through large PDFs or images to an email, it's just one extra click that the journalist has to get through to get to the information that they need. But secondly, it can clog up inboxes at a time when they're receiving thousands of these emails. So you want to get that information to them right away, and that's why it's so important to have the hook of your email, the hook of your press release, the most important part of what you're saying right at the top, so that if they do only read that first paragraph, they've got a lot of the information that they need to decide whether they want to come along and see your show and write about it.
Yeah, and that can even start like in the subject line of your email, rather than just saying press release, name of show. You can put a bit of like a headline that we try and give examples like in our templates and things. So once we've read your show, we can try and be like, oh, we'll pull out this headline, and why not stick that in the email and mention the Fringe. The amount of people press releases we read that you get right to the bottom and you're like, you actually haven't mentioned the fact you're coming to the Fringe, because I assume it's because everyone's living in the Fringe bubble a little bit, and not realising that, I need to actually tell that journalist that we're looking for them specifically to come to the Fringe, or we're looking for them to review, or we're looking for them to write a feature. Like, just be really direct about what you want to get from the journalist, without being too, without being like hounding them too much kind of thing.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think you're right, there's definitely a balance you need to strike, because you've got to bear in mind that for many reviewers, they're incredibly busy. They're going to see over 100 shows. So you have to strike that balance of being direct, so they know what your show is about, they have the key information to hand, but also not being rude or demanding things.
Totally, I would say that's one of our, you'll see it in the avoid column there, one of the things we always say is like, follow up, don't pester. Nobody wants to get an email that says like, oh, did you get my last email? Like, it's 2018, emails work. People will have received it unless you got like a failure notice. You don't want to be like, oh, are you coming? You haven't told me you're coming. It's more like, hey, just getting in touch again because we've got this update, we've got these brand new images, or we've just done a successful preview, or hey, we've arrived in Edinburgh and we're really excited. And obviously once the Fringe starts, press releases, you can contact people maybe a bit more regularly, if you've got like a sellout show, or if you've got some really nice audience reviews, that kind of thing. So just remember that you're talking to a human being who's also incredibly busy, and is trying to see as much work as they physically can, while also then writing about that work. So I
just had a question for you guys, because I don't really know the answer myself. And it's,
we do.
How common is it for a journalist to receive a release and then not reply to you, but actually still come and see your show? And
incredibly common. In an ideal world, obviously, you'd send your release and you'd get a lovely response being like, hi, Daniel, that's great. Your stand-up show sounds wonderful. I'll come and see it on August the 10th, and the review will be out on the 12th. Obviously, that would be great in an ideal world. However, a lot of the times, realistically, what you're doing is you're putting it in the journalist's head, hopefully putting it down on their list of shows, and then as we go along, that should hopefully turn around to them decide to come to see it, or you're getting on an editor's list who then will send someone else to see the show. It might not always be the person that you've initially contacted, but you might have then sort of found the gateway into that publication.
Yeah, there was a question I just wanted to address as well. Monica asked just then, do you, when you're doing follow-up press releases, do you have to, when you're you've sent out your initial press release and you're sending out follow-up press releases, and as Alan said, you should come up with kind of a different angle each time. Monica asked, do you need to be sending out a different angle to each different journalist? No, you don't. I mean, if you've got an update, you've sent out your initial press release around now, next month you might have an update because your company has won an award, or you finished rehearsals, you're on your way to Edinburgh, something's happened that you want to update journalists with, you can just send out the same press release to all the journalists. It's always worth, again, personalising that email and just saying, again, dear John, I sent you a press release last month, just wanted to let you know this has happened. Still here to if you wanted to interview me or come along to the show in August. So
yeah, and if you're doing a different angle, a lot of the times what you're changing is that personalised message at the top that Caroline was talking about, and actually the core release. If you get your core release right, a lot of the messaging of that is actually staying very much the same throughout, and it's just how you angle that and how you direct it changes. We also there's another question on the same thing from Cameron.
Yeah, I was
about how important are images to the press release. Sometimes it feels like Carol and I are like buzzkills when it comes to images, because someone's like, oh, we've designed this beautiful thing and it's got like all the images embedded in it, and we're like, no, don't send it, put it in the body of release. Caroline, I think, mentioned it before, like linking out to your images is great, because people do want to see if your show's got great images, and sometimes like a sort of visual stimulus is a nice way to be like, oh, actually this does look really exciting. It's just, please do, I would hold off from sending them as any kind of attachment, especially like a big high-res bulky image.
Yeah, I mean, you can still let the media know that you do have images available. The best ways of doing that are including a link to something like a Dropbox and saying, you know, for high-res images, go here and include the link. Or you can put the media contacts details in your press release and say something like, for interviews, information, or high-res images, please contact. They're kind of the two best ways of doing that. But certainly, in the first instance, avoid sending through bulky high-res images. And you can still have, Alan, a PDF, a beautifully designed PDF, right?
You have your beautiful PDF and you send that on request. So if someone's like, oh, I want to know more about your show, that's when you send them the beautifully designed one, because you've already made first contact. It's only if you're sending it out cold, that's when you just want it to be as easy to access and read as possible. We could talk about press releases all day. It's like our passion. But we really need to get on to the next section. So
there's just one question, sorry, that I'd like to, before we moved on, from Expressing Humanity, who's asking if we recommend including past reviews. Certainly we do. Yes, absolutely. And if you haven't already had a look at the template, the press release template that we have available, we've got some really good suggestions on how to incorporate those into your press release. So get in touch with us and I'll send that through to you.
My top tip for that is always those reviews should support what you're saying, not dominate it. So they're backing up all the great stuff you're saying and sort of validating what you're saying rather than sort of leading with someone else's opinion. So the purpose of them there is to support and validate what you're saying. So if you get any other questions about press releases as we go, please do throw them in the chat or give us an email at mediaadvice@fringe.com. We'll try to get to those. But I'm going to turn to my colleague Daniel, social media guru, to talk a little bit about how you use social media to help sort of market your Fringe show and help make sure you're part of the conversation. So go ahead, Daniel.
How to join the conversation. As you can imagine, the Fringe is an amazing, exciting, sort of buzzing landscape with people going in and out of shows and grabbing drinks. And as you can see with the photo from the slides, people still have time to jump on their phones to look at the Fringe app or take a selfie to talk about their sort of time at the Fringe. So social media is an absolutely fantastic way to get your show noticed and get it out there and be part of that huge buzz that we get on social media. We get, the Fringe hashtag and various other sort of tags are used tens of maybe hundreds of thousands of times during the festival.
I can put those up for you on
the screen. Pop them up
there.
You go. Just one more. Pop them up there. There you go. So people mention us or the hashtag hundreds of thousands of times during the festival. So it's a sort of a go-to place to see the buzz and what people are talking about. The first piece of advice, it's a little bit negative actually about social media, is that on the whole, it is free. There's obviously advertising and various other avenues you can explore there. But on the whole, social media is free in financial terms, but it's not free in time. And during August in particular, you're going to be so busy with your promotion, with your flyering, and even in the run-up with rehearsals and preparations. You really need to bear in mind how much time you're dedicating to it. I've kind of jumped the gun there, to talk about, but just really think about sort of how much time you're going to spend, and that leads on to that sort of first question about trying to work out what social media channels work best for you and your show.
Yeah, and Daniel, sorry to interrupt, but that is a question we actually get a lot. Like people say, should I have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? Like, do I do all of them? What's the best one, do you think, for performers and shows?
I think it goes back to that earlier question about who is your show for. Just have a thought about, do I have a certain age range I'm going for, a certain interest that I'm looking for. But the main sort of differences about the channels that we would mostly recommend are the ones that we use as well for the sort of same reasons we'd recommend them, which we have sort of Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and they all have their sort of own positives and negatives. The one thing we would say about Facebook is it's incredibly hard to start off and build an audience. The reason being that it's an inherently closed platform, unlike Twitter or Instagram where there are hashtags and you can kind of stumble across conversations. In this case, using the hashtag into the unknown, as you see on screen. With Facebook, people are less likely to discover you. It's not to say it's not a useful tool, especially if you have diehard fans, but imagine this is sort of day zero for you and you don't have any accounts. We wouldn't say Facebook is the first thing to look at.
I always say Facebook's really good for drumming up the support you already have.
Yeah.
It's a really good way of like activating your sort of army of fans that you may already have, or getting friends and family to know what your project's about. And it's also good for being long running. So if you set it up to be your company or yourself rather than the show specifically, that can then stay and grow with you once this projects over.
That's incredibly important, and it's true whether you're a solo performer or indeed performing as a company. Make sure you sort of have a brand and a channel that you can keep in years to come. Speaking from experience as an audience goer, there are people who I saw in my first ever Fringe who I followed on Twitter, and I still follow them to this day, and that sort of prompted me to go back, even though their company name may have changed or the shows have taken a radically different direction. We're still connected, and I'm so much more likely to go back to them than a show that I saw in 2013 but don't have any details of.
Yeah. And it's the same thing, like everyone wants to spread word of mouth at the Fringe, so like if you finish a show and you want to sing from the rooftops about how great it is and you don't know those channels, so actually using your sort of a quick sort of bucket speech after the show to just sort of say, hey, if you enjoyed this, sort of spread the word, you can find us here. It's a really important thing.
I have a quick question that comes up sometimes in my one-on-one sessions, which hopefully one of you can answer. And that is, some people have already started posting or tweeting from, for example, their show channel.
Mm-hmm.
They ask me, should they stop doing that and start a performer channel or a show, a company channel now?
So they've created a specific
they've
profile.
got their show name, and the profile on the channel is all just their show, and they're talking about it from there. Should they continue with that, or is this the time to change?
Well, if we're thinking specifically on Instagram or Twitter, the brilliant thing about them is you can rebrand the channel, as it were. So on Twitter, you can change your biography, your username, your main name.
Daniel did mine for me when I started. Thank you.
You can evolve it on, and I think at this stage in particular, there's a huge case for branding yourself as the solo performer, or indeed if you're a solo character performer maybe, or your theatre company. Brand it that way, so then all the work you put in now to build an audience you can use in the weeks and months and years to come.
So it's not too late?
It's not too late. It's never too late, even if that was on day one of the festival, because once we launched the program, if there was a graph, I'm doing a hand gesture which is useless over audio, and there's a buzz
increasing in a gradient.
It's going up. Interest grows up until program launch, then it takes a big leap up. But on day one of the Fringe, then it goes through the roof. So if you're all set up for day one, or indeed day two or day three, as long as you get there, it's huge. And I kind of was saying, when you do that speech at the end of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good way to also you're a community of people, other performers, all of you guys in the comment section, you're kind of like peers at the moment. So if you meet people, if you love their show, kind of share that love and make sure you're part of a conversation. So it's never just you speaking out into the ether. It should be being part of a conversation. And the great thing about the Fringe is because it's so vast, there's so many different offshoots of conversations that can happen that you just want to make sure you're a part of that and you're kind of sharing that and spreading that message so as people can find you and talk about you. So it's kind of one of the sort of closing things I wanted to ask you, Daniel, on social media to keep us racing along. Is kind of what should one person be in charge of the social media, or is it best to kind of split it around?
I'll try and be as quick and concise as I can. There's a number of approaches you could take, particularly if you're a group. You could decide between you that this is the voice of our theatre company and how we're going to talk, and perhaps give it a slight persona. Maybe it's cheeky, maybe it's witty, maybe it's very serious, maybe it's dry, and then you could all conform to that. Alternatively, you could acknowledge that you're a company of individuals with different characters, and maybe on different days take it over and give it identity. So imagine if all three of us had a theatre company, Alan would have his own voice, Caroline, you'd have your voice, and I would have something else, I'm not quite sure. And that way you can give a bit of personality. So that's sort of about who can manage it and then what voice you're using. And when it comes to who can manage it, like I said earlier, it is a time commitment, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with sharing it out. But I think the key advice on social, just to allow us to move on, looking at the clock, is that you don't want to feel like you're shouting into the ether. So if you use the hashtag into the unknown, this is where the majority of conversations about the Fringe are happening. So you'll see that community of performers and visitors alike talking about the Fringe. And another sort of bonus thing we're going to be doing is in those emails we send to the media contacts, we're going to be giving a few sort of inside track tips of how we're promoting the Fringe and little campaigns we're doing. So we really recommend looking out for them, particularly in the run-up to the Fringe. There are a number of little sort of challenges and games that you can get involved with that will really get noticed.
Great. And an important point of engaging with ourselves, to go back to that point about we're open access, we love everyone the same, that means that we can't just like retweet someone. Do you know what I mean? So like stay looking at us for things like Into the Unknown and the kind of games and sort of chats that we try and create. Follow them, because that's the way that we can help you, rather than asking us to retweet you, because we could never do that.
I'm looking at Alan in a funny way because you've just stolen one of my
sorry, Daniel.
my golden nuggets of advice.
Spoiler: there's a top tip 6 at the end. And
I've got 13 minutes to come up with another one.
Well, I've not covered it properly, so
okay,
I'll
go in more depth. I was just going to tackle James's excellent question, which is there any existing research on how Fringe attenders find out about their shows?
That's a good question.
There is. I don't have the graph in front of me.
You could draw it with your hand.
I could draw it with my hand, but that would be useless. We do have that research, and on the broad sense, there's kind of the obvious points of the Fringe program, edfringe.com, the Fringe app, and journalists. But social media does register up there.
Really
it's definitely in the top 10, maybe even the top 6. It's a good proportion of people do look out on social, particularly Twitter, for people just writing tiny reviews on social for recommendations.
And I would say my experience with the Fringe, to answer that question, you want to get into as many of those channels as possible. It's not about, I think, throwing all your weight behind one. It's about having like a clustered kind of people will see me on social media, they'll see this preview we've got a review, we've got our listing working really well on edfringe.com. It's kind of a combination of all those things.
My final thing on that social point, which is just this think about the channel if you're not super experienced with using it. In the obvious sense that Twitter is a written medium, and although you can chuck in videos and photos, it's a written medium, it's a chance to sort of say things. Instagram, obviously, that's where you've got to focus on the visual. Think about what you can share from behind the scenes, something that's just visually striking, and actually think that you may have seen something 100 times, but your audience members or people coming to the Fringe haven't seen it. So don't underestimate kind of how interesting behind the scenes content is. And I think I'm going to wrap up social there because I've just seen the clock again.
Yeah, cool. So we're just about to go on to the legendary Fringe aspect that is flyering and posters, but just firstly, I can see the question from Kenneth. They have their previews at the end of July, and will that be too late to send a follow-up? Caroline, do you want to...
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, there's no hard and fast rule about when you should be sending press releases at all. Just make sure you get your first one out in the next few weeks. There's no point sending press releases where you don't have anything else new to say. So, if you're going to say something, make it worthy. And if that worthy thing is happening in July, then wait till July. No worries at all there, Kenneth.
Yeah. And in fact, that makes a really good way to do a follow-up just before August. It's actually
Absolutely.
Probably ideal timing to kind of get on the radar. So as promised, the joy now of flyers and posters. So we've got 2 slides in these. The first one is very much on sort of questions that we all have about design. So Caroline, what sort of questions have you been getting asked about, like how should someone design their flyers, or what pitfalls they should try and avoid falling into?
Well, I guess people are asking about, should they be using a different image on their flyers, a different image on their posters, a different image in their program? Do they have to include all the information? Does there have to be a show synopsis? Obviously, what you include on your flyers and your posters is completely up to you. We tend to say that choose an image, choose some wording, and stick with it. So hopefully whatever image if you're registered, you're in the program, hopefully whatever image you've chosen for that will be the same image that's going to be appearing on your flyers and your posters if you choose to have them. It's about not putting all of the information on the poster and the flyer, but having the essentials, obviously your full listings information, so where your show is, what time it is, and ticketing information. So yeah, it's just about having that consistency so that when people are walking around the city come August and they're being handed all of these flyers and they're seeing posters up everywhere. I know in the past when I visited the Fringe, if I'm seeing a poster or an image around everywhere, or I'm handed a flyer, I instantly can recognise that is a flyer or a poster I've seen around the city. So yeah.
And nearly all the ones that work are like simple and striking. It's like one really definite image. It's not too busy, and it just, as Caroline says, it starts to get in your head because you've seen it on edfringe.com. It's lots of different places, and you start to get that recognition. So the final question we sort of get about the creation of flyers and posters is like how many? First of all, I'd say there are loads. We have a services directory that sits on edfringe.com, which is a really useful place to find experienced printers, designers, but there's so many companies in Edinburgh that are so used to now doing fringe jobs that once they've done the design work, sometimes it doesn't cost that much more to do like a reprint if you've run out of flyers. You want to think about the environmental impact as well as sort of your financial impact of getting too many flyers or too much print. I'm still finding print from 2009 when I got it really wrong. I'm like, how have these not all been recycled yet? And what we've just put on the screen now is a little bit of a formula that we like to give as a general guide when you're trying to figure out quantities. And we'd say the number of people realistically who are going to be flyering, then the number of hours that they're realistically going to be flying for. I don't think that should never be more than sort of 2 to 3 hours a day, because after that they will not be flying effectively, which we'll be talking about in the next slide. The number of days they'll be flying, and then times that by 50. If you're handing out 50 flyers an hour, I think you're doing a really good job, because you need to be having those conversations. It's not just about shouting and throwing as much paper out into the world as you can. So hopefully that can help give you like a sort of vague outline of quantities.
Just before you go on, Alan, Kenneth wants to know if you're doing theatre, should your image include all the cast members and the name of the show, I guess?
All their names.
Or their names, or the names of the cast members. Not quite sure, but what do you think? What do you think about Kenneth's question?
I would say no, just on the keeping it simple, keeping it striking aspect. What a lot of people do is they have like a really simple, really basic, sometimes just like printed out Word document that's kind of like a program that they give to audiences when they come in. Same with the press release. You don't want to shove it so full of cast information. That's kind of can be in a notes to editor section or like in a program that you give out when people arrive. I think it's obviously if you've got like, I don't know, a massive celebrity is in your show and you think it's a massive selling point, absolutely stick their name in it. But actually if it's about the show, not the sort of component cast members, then that's not something you have to worry about trying to get on the poster.
And Amanda's got an excellent question about distribution, which leads us into our next
seamless, Amanda.
slide. Thank you, Amanda.
We've got a plant.
Yeah.
Just putting our questions in for us.
Yeah, so just quick, really about flyering, so the distribution of flyers, it's all about that elevator pitch from the first slide that we talked about. It's being able to have conversations. Flyering can be sad. Sometimes it cannot be the most fun job in the world, but actually that's probably means you're doing it wrong. If you get to the point where you're just standing kind of holding out your flyer hoping someone will take it, it's probably time to go home or change location, give yourself a break. It's about trying to make those conversations. So actually, yeah, if 20 people just walk past but then one person stops and has a conversation with you where you can be like, can I tell you about my show? That's what you want to be doing. And actually the bit of print is actually just their takeaway from that conversation to remind them about kind of the talk you had. I also say don't feel tied to a location. Like a lot of people are like, oh, the Royal Mile, it's such an iconic place for flyering, and it is. And some people are really successful in the Royal Mile. But I will say it's a massive sort of area for tourists and for families, and not necessarily all shows. So there's some people that'll come to Fringe Central and they'll be like, oh, I've been flying for like days on the Royal Mile and I just don't think it works. And we're like, that's okay. The time to like change it. I would say like change location, like move around. Don't ever go on someone else's turf, as it were. Like you don't want to go into a venue that isn't yours because you'll just get into trouble, and you don't want to stand like right in the entranceway being like, oh, I'm not inside, because you don't want to be that person that's being in any way like obstructive or annoying, because as much as the Fringe is massive, it's also quite a small community, and you start to hear about people who are like being annoying or getting in the way, and the Fringe is such like a moving animal that you don't want to slow anyone down. But that's not to say you can't learn the thoroughfares between places. Daniel,
I was just going to say something completely unrelated to distribution, that we're likely to overrun past 9 o'clock. So we're just going to remind you that you can catch up later. And also, if you have to head off, please do chuck a question in. and we'll try and cover it later. So you just can come back if you later today or maybe tomorrow, and we'll try and cover your question after that time. But we are going to overrun slightly. But we will try and cover everything.
So, and on that, we'll move swiftly from the land of flyers to the land of posters. Caroline?
I did just have a question, Alan, about
Okay.
flyering when you said don't get on anyone's turf. What about flyering queues of shows that are similar to yours, but they might not be at the same venue?
So what I would do is you very much have to talk to the people whose show it is and make sure you have their permission. You don't, like, people tend to frown on it, and there are sort of better ways to do it than flying the actual queue. Sometimes you can talk to each other and exchange flyers so as you can put it down on seats, for example, or they can do like a bit of a pitch for you after their show. Just, I would never do it unless you've got like express permission, just because again it can feel like, as much as it feels like you've got a captive audience, they're also an audience that are just trying to worry about getting into their show, and there are other ways to do them. I'd say trying to catch people on the way to shows, like you'll very much learn in August like where the thoroughfares are and where, I know that people move from George Square to the Pleasance Courtyard, for example, and you can try and find the right routes.
And even though there are 3,000 plus shows, it is still it's a close community, like you're saying. You want to keep everyone on side, and some of I have gone and seen shows that recommended another show in turn, and it is effective, and it shows that the kind of performer that helps each other out, and that leaves you with a good feeling.
So we've talked a lot about flyers. What are our feelings on posters?
Posters. Well, look, I think...
This is my fault. I'm really cynical on posters, and I'm worried I've spread it around the group.
Look, posters, there's nothing wrong with posters. If you've got a budget for posters, for advertising, then, and you've already covered your flyers, then why not whack some posters in as well? If you have a small budget, you only have an option to choose one, we definitely recommend flyers as being the better option, just because, you or somewhere else is on your behalf is actually handing someone that flyer and can actually sell them the show with your elevator pitch at that time. With a poster, people they may not see it, and you're certainly not having that conversation. So flyers are certainly the better option in terms of engagement. But if you are considering posters, or you have, looked at and organised some posters, that's great too. The thing about Edinburgh is that there's not many places within the city that you can actually poster legally.
Yeah, I think this is a good answer to Amanda's question about like sort of where you can put posters, sort of bars and cafes that are happy.
Absolutely. So your best bet initially is to check with your venue and see how many they'd be happy to take off your hands, because they're obviously able to put it up in the venue or in places around the venue that they are able to use every year. Your next bet is to check with restaurants and cafes and see if they'd be willing to put them in their windows, behind the bar, anything like that. There are a couple of towers on the Royal Mile where you can put your posters, but bear in mind everybody else does as well. So you might have your poster up there in the morning, and by lunchtime there's 10 other posters on top of yours. So that's not such a great option. What you can do though is contact a company called outofhandscotland.co.uk. That is up on the slide, so you can see the website there. They actually have the contract with Edinburgh City Council to be able to put posters up around the city. You may have seen, if you've ever been to the Fringe before or any other big festivals before, like entire walls where posters are kind of lining the entire wall. That's Out of Hand, working with the council. So if you do want to be part of that, then just get in touch with Out of Hand. They also do printing as well, and they can do everything from just printing, or they can do the distribution of both your posters and flyers as well. So when you're contacting the other printers on the services link that has been put up there in the thread, then it's worth just seeing what Out of Hand can quote you as well. It's always good to kind of negotiate and see who can give you the best deal.
And there's a bit of a final thing, just sort of my final poster warning. So if your poster is not somewhere where you've expressly asked permission for it to be there, and it's not in your venue, and it's not through Out of Hand, then it's probably illegal fly posting, and you definitely shouldn't do that, because you'll get a nice juicy fine, which nobody wants middle of run the Fringe, because if your poster is any good, they will know exactly where to find you for at least an hour every day, I imagine.
And Edinburgh's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so people will not look on you too kindly for plonking a poster up on a medieval wall.
That's very true. So
just before we go, Monica's asked the question, if you've got a small budget for the posters, is it better to invest in many small ones or a very few big ones?
That's kind of like it's kind of like a difficult question to answer out of context. So I definitely Monica, I'd definitely say, like, if you email mediaadvice@edfringe.com with like your artwork and examples, we can be a lot more specific. But what I would say is it goes back to like who your audience is and what your visuals are. So sometimes it might be like, actually you just got like a nice small scale production, you actually would like lots of just sort of volume and letting people know, whereas actually you might have a show where you're like, oh, actually we've got a really key demographic and we've got a really striking ad that we think really sells the show. So you'd have to be really confident in your design and your artwork, and if you are, then think really carefully about the sites you want them, not just like, oh, they've got these 5 sites available, so we'll do those. Actually be like, oh, they've got a site near Summer Hall and we've got quite like an avant-garde show and we know that's where that audience tends to congregate. So it's one of those like sort of grey area questions, but definitely, like, if you've got specifics, emails at mediaadvice@edfringe.com and we can hopefully help you unravel that. So just moving on to the next slide, just so I'm conscious of how much we've got to get through. Other advertising opportunities. Daniel, did you? I threw this to you yesterday. You were over the moon when I threw it to you yesterday. Do you want to talk a little bit about other advertising opportunities that are available to companies?
It links in quite well, I guess, that press release topic we were talking about earlier, that when you start reaching out to journalists, you may get people getting in touch saying we'd like to advertise with us or offering loads of opportunities. And our advice for this, kind of like everything else, is just do your research and work out who you're trying to get, what are you trying to achieve, and what kind of budget you have, because there are so many options, whether that's online or in print or indeed with posters, that you can look at. When it comes to actually advertising through the media, our recommendation is ask for a media pack and get information on their demographics and who's going to look at it to make sure you're targeting the right audience. But in all these cases, if you just get in touch with us on mediaadvice@edfringe.com, we can help advise whether this is suitable, whether you are getting a good deal. And when it's with these third parties, do haggle. I mean, these advertising rates are always flexible. And
never feel pressured, I think. Like sometimes you can feel like a big pressure if you get an email to be like, oh, this is something that I should be doing. And please don't ever feel like that you're pressured into something. Know what your budget is and stick to it, so as you'd never feel pressured to overspend. Sometimes someone will get in touch and it will be a genuine bargain that works for you, so absolutely go down that road, but don't ever feel you have to if that doesn't fit with your budget. And I guess the last place, is edfringe.com. Is a really popular avenue. Like, it's a very popular site, and we do offer advertising. We never do the hard sell. We'll tell you about our advertising opportunities, but we don't like to go in like with a big hard sell and make people feel like they ever have to. One disclaimer, we've told you to haggle. The one place you shouldn't haggle actually is with us, and it's not because we want to make all the money in the world. It's actually to do with us being completely fair and impartial again, of everyone pays the same. So whether you're some sort of massive name that everyone knows off the telly, or someone who's waiting to break through and hasn't appeared anywhere yet, everyone will get charged the same, and that's how we roll.
That's how we keep it fair.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end now. Keep the questions coming in if you've got any. There's one from Kenneth, Caroline. Their show is based on real life addiction, so instead of flyers, they're thinking of using sobriety chips with information of the show. Do you think this is an effective idea?
Look, people use all sorts of things when they're handing out, their flyers and their show information on the Royal Mile. We've seen lots of things, haven't we, Alan? We've seen playing cards.
Totally. And I would say they work when they're... Actually, this links right into what we're talking about next, which is getting noticed out and about on the Fringe. If you are doing any kind of like stunt or any kind of gimmick, what you want to do is you want to keep it really, really relevant to what's happening. Do you agree, Caroline?
Yeah, absolutely. Photo calls can be a great way to get a photo printed in the next day's paper. And there's a lot of great ideas, but it doesn't work for every show. you've got to find an idea that that is obviously relevant to your show, and also that you're going to have people come along to. And the best way of doing that is using the Fringe Clash Diary, which will be up and working later in the year. Essentially, that is...
I just got to apologise, the slides have briefly popped off the screen. We're going to sort it in a second.
Technical issues,
So
please stand by.
Daniel and Eve are now frantically moving around us, so Caroline and I are just going to keep the chat going. So the other thing, you were just talking about Clash Diary.
Clash Diary, yeah, which will be up and active later in the year, and essentially that is like an online diary that is referred to every day by the media. But what you'll be using that for is if you've got an idea for a publicity stunt or a photo call, you should check that diary for when you are thinking you might want to do it, just to make sure that there's nothing else happening on at the time.
Totally.
Because you want people to turn up, you want the media to turn up. So if you can see in there that there's another big event happening on that same day, is only going to mean that people are not going to show up to your stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to spend lots of time and energy planning something so as you then realises on the exact same time as a massive venue is doing their whole venue launch kind of thing. The other thing that was on our beautiful slide was talking about the Virgin Money street event stages. Now, the street events are what happens on the Royal Mile and in the Mount Precinct. They're very famous. You normally see pictures of them all when the Fringe is like out and about. They're really sort of busy hubs. Well, we have stages that are available for participants to get like a 20-minute slot to sort of do a sort of small section of your show and promote that to the sort of the wider audience. They really work well for some genres. They work really well, music works really well there. Some dance, something really visual tends to work really well. Something that can grab attention in a busy street. Sometimes just quite a small dramatic scene from a play won't work so well. So think about the opportunity and whether or not it works for you. And if it does, absolutely head to our website and apply for one of those slots in those stages. Caroline,
that's sort of a little bit in relation to Monica's question, which has just come up, Alan, which is she's got a cabaret show, and just in terms of a photo call, should you be doing something that's actually, moving, or are we looking for a sort of a static kind of literal photo shoot?
For a photo call, it's that literal image. It's about getting that striking image. Like for a publicity stunt, if you're doing something like a flash mob, then absolutely you can go with that. But for the photo call, you want to try and get an image that links, primarily if you can tie it to the city, it works really well because it means that people can run it as coverage. There's lots of people doing lots of reviews and things, but actually people forget that there are massive Fringe supplements where they need to fill that with more general Fringe content. So if you can do a show, create an image that kind of ties your show to the city and what's going on, that can be really effective.
And we've just had a very quick question, and I don't know if either of you how much knowledge you have around this, but customary costume in the Pacific can involve a lot of skin. What are your local bylaws around acceptable attire when flyering? Alan, Daniel's got his hand up. He's ready to go for this one.
I think this comes down to one of the key things about the Fringe, that nothing is out of the ordinary.
Yeah, we've seen it all.
Literally. And out and about, I don't think you have much to worry about outside the normal boundaries. But you walk down the Royal Mile. If you saw the video at the start of this stream, you see all kinds of things. So I wouldn't be too concerned that it would be too unusual or an issue.
You can push those boundaries quite far as long as you're within the law. Then it tends to be fine.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's sort of everything we've sort of talked about getting out and about. Are the slides back with us?
The slides are back.
Yeah, I love our slides. Just in time for one of our final ones, which is introducing you to Fringe Central. Now, if any of you have done the Fringe before, you'll be hopefully very aware of Fringe Central. It's our home away from home in August. We want it to be your home away from home. It's based in Appleton Tower, which is on the corner of George Square, which is a bit of a hub where there's lots of different venues. Basically, it's somewhere where you can come for free as a participant, pop in and say hello to us. You could do like your photocopying, any admin that you need to do, that kind of thing. Also, just somewhere you can chill out. If you've been like flying all day and you don't have time to go back to your digs before coming back, going back and doing your show, we want you to use Fringe Central. We want you to meet each other. We want you to buddy up. Come and say hello to us. There's a whole program of events that will be launched. Is it next Tuesday, Daniel?
It's Tuesday, yes.
Yeah, the Fringe Central events program comes out, and those are a whole series of free events that you get as part of your registration with the Fringe. And they really are, they cross the gamut of, they're not just for the producers, they're for like the performers in your show. We've got stuff for backstage. There's so many opportunities that you can use to like sort of get involved and broaden your network.
And these like workshops and talks and things.
Yeah,
like
workshops, talks. We even have like a sanctuary that opens. I think that opens like in week 1 of the Fringe, where generally it's like a bit of a chill out meditation kind of space where someone comes in, you can get a massage.
Can we go and get a massage?
We can.
Yes.
Well, we normally don't have time, but like if we do, you can't step too near the sanctuary, you will instantly fall asleep during August. It's like the most chilled out place in the world. And that's generally because the Fringe can be a really overwhelming time. Like I don't want to be too doom and gloom because it's also like the funnest time and there's nobody else I'd rather be, but like it can be really overwhelming and you need to look after your mental and physical health at the same time. And genuinely, if I can say anything about the service we provide, it's we're here for you. So if you, even like arriving in the city, like Daniel was talking about it before, like how sort of vast and popular and busy and vibrant the Fringe is, which is great, but there are times where you arrive and it can feel incredibly overwhelming. And we have people every year that come in and they just pop in to say hello to us. They don't actually have specific questions. And then we sit down and have a chat, and the amount of people that leave going like, oh my God, I now just feel set up and ready to go. Like genuinely, that's what we want you to use Fringe Central for. Like genuinely, come and use it like it's yours, because it is. And we've just got a bit of a plug for an event that the media office runs, part of the Fringe Central events program, called Meet the Media. Hopefully you've heard of it before. It happens on the first Saturday of the Fringe, so in this year it's the 4th of August, and it runs from 1 o'clock right through till 6 p.m. It's basically like speed dating for your show. We have the media set up at tables. The participants all queue. You queue to get in the building, and then once you're in the building, you queue some more. It's very much like a festival of queuing. Be prepared to queue. Because at the end of that queue is a chance to sit down and have 2 or 3 minutes to just chat to a journalist. That old elevator pitch again. Get that out to just really sell your show to as many people as you can. But I like to be a bit doom and gloom about it. I like to be like, you're going to be queuing, it's going to be hot in that room, wear appropriate footwear. People never listen because people like to come in costume and that does look really cool and impressive, or they bring props. But actually, as long as you have printed out copies of your press release, maybe some flyers, and that pitch ready to go, journalists can see that they can see through gimmicks. They're ready to just know what your show is and why it's important and why they should see it.
And we'll have some more information coming out about that, about registering and who is going to be appearing at the Meet the Media in an upcoming media bulletin that will go out to your media contacts.
Yeah, the important thing to know is that it's 2 people can come per show, so you can either stay together or split up, and there's free beer.
No one told me that.
Yeah, no, there is. We can't get it till the end, so it's like an endurance test for us. But participants can tuck right in. Just don't get too drunk. We've seen it happen before.
Then have a show that evening. Shall we jump to the next bit and then sweep up the questions at the end?
Yeah.
So this is kind of your final call just to throw any questions into the live chat, but obviously if you think of something a bit later, as ever, media advice at edfringe.com is your place to go, and we'll do our very best to help.
Yeah, I was just waiting till you finish so you don't talk over my great slide.
Whoa!
Whoa! Top tips, everyone. Yeah, so this is just like a final sort of, it's a nice way to end, I thought, of like each of us giving what our top tip is for kind of making the most of your Fringe experience. So up first is Caroline.
Look, my top tip is don't panic. I have had people emailing me going, oh my God, what am I doing? I've got no idea. Look, the fact that you're already on this session, this live session now, shows that you're already really prepared. If you can get your press release out in the next couple of weeks and you're already thinking about things like flyers and social media and all of that kind of stuff, then you're in a really great position, because a lot of people do just turn up on day 1 of the Fringe and they haven't done anything. Trust us. So just stop panicking. think about what you want to do and just start preparing now. And if you have any questions, obviously just email us at Media Advice. By the time, if you're prepared now, that means by the time you get to the Fringe in August, you can actually just fully focus on your show. You can, make sure that you're not worrying about all this by the time you get into the city. And that means that when you are here, you can just enjoy it. I mean, you're coming to the Fringe, and that is amazing. This is the biggest arts festival in the world, and whether it's your first time or your 10th time, you've got to just really enjoy this time, like make the most of it. This is an incredible thing that you're doing, and so when you get here, just make sure that you're enjoying your show every day. Audiences are enjoying your show every day, and if you don't live in Edinburgh, it's a chance for you to sort of explore the city, maybe get out of the city and do some exploring between shows. So enjoy this time. This is all about you.
If Caroline's left you anything, Daniel, I spoilered you earlier on.
I'm just glad we got the slides up and running for your animation. So Alan did steal my first top tip, which was
so sorry.
Because I'm going to recap though, because it's an important one. Because we're impartial, don't think you're going to be the first person who's ever direct messaged us saying, "Hey, can I get a retweet for my show?" It's just something we're not able to offer because we have to treat all shows equally. And we, if we were to retweet every show once, that would take about a month just to get through every show. That said, we do offer a number of opportunities to get involved with us. Through the hashtag Into the Unknown, but we also run various different challenges and games. One example is every Friday at 3 o'clock UK time, we do a little game called Bad Joke Friday, where people suggest just terrible jokes and we retweet some of our favourites. And if you take part in that, as long as you're not telling a joke and then also saying, "Come see my show at 3 p.m, we can engage and retweet and like what you're doing. We want to do everything we can to get you noticed, but we still have to treat everyone equally. So it has to be when you're getting involved with games like that. And my actual top tip, because that was stolen, it's a little plug, is that there are a number of events in Fringe Central, like they say, and some of these include how to promote your show, and we did have 2 sessions on social media. So whether you are a complete newcomer to social media or you kind of have intermediate knowledge, we have 2 little sessions just to bring you up to speed. They're on the first weekend, just to give you some top tips about how to make the most of social during the festival.
You get to see Daniel and I early in the morning trying to survive the Fringe and give great chat.
We'll try our best.
And I guess that leaves me. Do you know what? This is going to sound really generic and cheesy, but my top tip is be nice. Genuinely, we talk so much about the Fringe being massive, but we've said it before, it's also a really small community, and journalists talk to each other, venues talk to each other, participants talk to each other. You don't want to get like a sort of wrong, you want to put the good energy out there to get it back. You want to be the show that people talk about in a really positive way. If you've come up with an idea for like a great discount, or you're planning something, make sure your venue knows, like make sure they're in the loop. Don't send an email that's too like hassling a journalist or try and play a journalist off against one another. If you get a bad review, like that can't always be easy emotionally, but the best thing to do is generally ignore it and move on. Like throw your energy behind something that's working for you. Don't fight back or clap back ever, because you very, very rarely come out of that looking good. It's about making sure you make the most of the Fringe. Like, get yourself out and about. Like, if you're out there engaging in the festival, if you're out there seeing shows, if you're talking about other shows being great, you become part of that conversation and part of that amazing atmosphere that you can't get anywhere else in the world. And I would say that's mine.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So shall we jump? We're just about to wrap up, but we got to pick up a few questions we haven't already, including the great question, bare bottom question mark. We're not best to advise on legalities, but pretty sure it's fine. But I guess, as ever, just get in touch with us.
We've seen a bare bottom one.
We've seen
I've definitely seen a bare bottom.
But if you're not sure, as ever, just drop us a line. Any marketing you're going to do or any promotion you're going to do, and you're not sure whether this will be okay, drop us a line of mediaadvice@fringe.com and we'll see whether it's okay.
And then from bare bottoms to Cameron's customer erotica on typewriter as the promotional approach, and having office hours every day. Now, that isn't something I would generally put in the Clash Diary because it's happening every day. The Clash Diary is meant to be one-off events. So what the difference would be is if one day you'd invited photographers and we're making it more of a photo call, or you'd planned like a bit of a flash mob around you, or we're doing something that marked one as a bit more of a promotional opportunity, because if it happens every day, then it's almost kind of like flyering or promote, and that's not the kind of thing that we would have in the Clash Diary, that if you wanted to turn that into like a bit of more of an event one day and do like have more of a come at this time and for 5 minutes there'll be like this photo opportunity, that then becomes the kind of thing we could put in the Clash Diary. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and Amanda Jane, who is as excited about the free beer as me, Australia represent, my shows aren't until later in the Fringe, and she's coming from Australia. She's wondering if it's worthwhile to ensure she is at the Meet the Media event on the 4th, because she wasn't planning on getting into town until the 15th, Alan.
So I would say don't worry, is my thing. Like, so Meet the Media is a great opportunity if you're here, but also you'd never know how many people you're going to get to see in that event. It's a very busy event, so I wouldn't change my plans dramatically, because that is quite a dramatic change in travel plans to be here for the 4th. What I would do is use that as another way to contact the press. Like we've talked about giving more information. We'll send out the bulletin of who's there. If you know who you wanted to see, that's a perfect chance to send your release one last time and be like, hi, totally understand you and your publication were Meet the Media today. Would have loved to have seen you, but I'm still in Australia and I will be heading over next week. But here's what I would have said, and here's my press release, and use it as another chance to sort of get your word out in your way.
James wants to know when most sales happen for the Fringe. Daniel, you might be able to help with this.
Jane really coming in with the very data-driven questions, where again
I feel like you and James would be friends. I feel like
there are, again, spreadsheets and graphs that cover this, but with many of our answers, there is no hard and fast set rule. Once shows are on sale, people are buying tickets. Some people like to plan meticulously with their spreadsheet in advance, or using the Fringe app where they bookmark their shows and build a planner and they book weeks in advance. Others buy tickets up to 5 minutes before the show, and you just got to bear in mind that is the case for almost every show, and your marketing efforts should reflect that people are looking for shows to see in June, July, right up until your final performance. There are still people who are going to take a chance and buy a ticket.
It should be like, I'm going to do Daniel's hand gesture for graphs again, which you can't see, but it should be like a sort of if you imagine like a sort of less steep gradient, like just a gradual climb is what I would say. Like from my experience of being a participant, you get that dread and that panic when you're like, oh god, there's not like sales ahead, and then suddenly when you get to like maybe 48 hours out, 24 hours out, it does start to go. Like I think there is as much as everything that Daniel said is true about you can't monitor when things are going to happen, and there are certain peaks like with launch and any sort of marketing activity you do, but I think there is a sort of general rule that there are Fringe audiences, there is that sort of 48 hours to go, 24 hours to go surge. Like I think a lot of people are like on the day kind of bookers, and it's just keep an eye on those ticket reports and check in with how you're doing. But I would say don't panic if you don't sell loads before the end of July.
And that's why things like the Half Price Hut works.
Amazing,
because people are buying tickets on the day of the show, or indeed through the Fringe app, they're buying tickets pretty much on the day of the show. So it varies, and there are just so many people seeing so many things.
You'll get a little bit addicted to checking your ticketing report. Like I used to like have it on like a refresh every hour of just logging in and being like, oh, there's another one gone. And it starts to get really exciting when people are buying your tickets that aren't your friends and family. You're like, I don't know who bought that ticket. That's a stranger. And it's a really nice feel. So it's just something to monitor. But I hope that's answered your question.
So should we just jump to the last?
Yeah. So just our last slide is basically how to keep in touch with us. Like you've made contact now, you're doing everything right, you're really prepared, so stay in touch. Don't leave us now. We've said it so many times, but media advice at edfringe.com is where to find us. You can follow us at edfringe, at Fringe Central, all those things. All of the resources and things, you can find them all in the Take Part section of our website. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us this morning, for wherever in the world you come to. It feels like we've had a lovely global reach today. I really hope you found this useful. If there's any questions you still have, as I say, please do email in. The lovely Caroline or myself will be all over that in the next sort of coming days. And so from me, Caroline, Daniel and Eve, I just want to say thank you very much for listening.